Well, it's an open secret that the way Africans are treated all over the world is different from how other people are treated. For example, if you hold a Nigerian passport, the way you're going to be treated at immigration and at the airport is very different from someone who's holding an American passport or a British passport or a Canadian passport. It has been so normalized that it doesn't shock Africans anymore when they receive racist treatment. But does that make it right? Now, the latest person to speak on this is the president of Namibia, who called to order the German ambassador by saying, you cannot lecture us on how to live, be, and relate with people, yet not just ordinary Namibians, but government dignitaries are humiliated and embarrassed at German airports just because they're Namibian passport holders, and by Western standards, these passports are lesser than because they come from Africa, and Africa is like the bush and the place where nothing exists, and so we're going to treat these people in a particular way. Hi guys, how you doing? Welcome to another episode of our charts. My name is Diaspora. I'm a business journalist and I'm also a digital content creator. You can always find my content on my channel, Art on Diaspora, where I talk to people who've relocated to Africa from the diaspora, just sharing their lessons, how the journey has been, the ups, the downs, so that when you're relocating or you plan to relocate, you have some information, and we're also building just a community of like-minded people. Now today I wanted to have a conversation with you guys on several African leaders that are rising up to the occasion and calling out Western double standard. And this is because rarely do we see African leaders standing up for Africa or their people, because there are so many repercussions that come with African leaders standing up against the West. One of these repercussions is Africa heavily does trade with the West, and so when you speak against the West or do anything that goes against what they stand for or what they value, then your people are bound to suffer. There's a big imbalance when it comes to trade, when it comes to relations. Africa heavily relies on the West for aid, and the aid money is used to fund education, is used to fund health, build infrastructure. And so African governments are always like one hand tied behind their back and blindfolded anytime they're dealing with the Western counterparts. But not anymore. I mean, African leaders are beginning to understand that as much as Africa needs the West needs Africa. Despite all the exploitation that has happened in Africa, without its resources, without its labor force, without Africa just being in existence, then there's no Western world, because it was built on Africans and it continues to thrive on the resources of the people of Africa. Now, most recently, there was an interview that has been going viral of the German ambassador having a conversation with the Namibian president. And in that conversation, he was raising issues about the Chinese migration to Africa and how their numbers are growing in Namibia. For context, China has been getting into Africa very aggressively, and President Xi Jinping has been very strategic in the way that he's aligning himself. So a lot of money has come into Africa. A lot of projects are being handled in Africa by the Chinese. But the double standard of this is that the Chinese are everywhere. They're not just in Africa, they're in Europe, they're in America. But because it misaligns with Western interests by China being on the continent, because it reduces their power and leverage over Africans, they're not necessarily happy. And the German ambassador was talking about how there are many Chinese people in Namibia now, more than German people. And he was asking the president, why isn't he worried? Why isn't this a big deal for you when more and more Chinese people are coming into your country? And let me tell you, the response that the president gave him is one of a lifetime. I think that he had been waiting for this moment, and he has seen how Germans have been treating not just Namibians but Africans, and used the opportunity to call him out. Now, the thing that I appreciate the most about what the president said is, one, he called out the double standard of the West, where when China is investing in America and Europe, it's all good, but when China is investing in Africa, then that's problematic. Two, you cannot be telling me that you care about me. Yeah, there's a way you treat my people. There's a way you treat them when they come abroad. You don't give them visas on time. Their passport is not worth it to you. When they give you labor, you're paying them $3, $4, $5 per hour. You make trained graduates go back to school to retrain again, yet they were working very well here. We are not talking about upskilling and just getting in line with where these industries are. It's go back to school all over again. So this, I think, are some of the issues that the president had noted and decided to address them. And so here's a clip of him addressing the issue.
So sorry for us. I don't see, Chinese will never come and play around here, as Germans not allowed to do that, which Germans are doing, by the way. You talk about Chinese, we allow Germans to come offer visas here, red carpet. Our people are harassed in Germany, even diplomatic passport holders in Germany. And you come in here, Germans come in here as they want. So why Chinese talk about Germans? How you are treating us there? Chinese don't treat us like that. Diplomatic passport. We're coming back from Geneva. These people were held up at the airport. Just now, last week, in Germany. We know what we will handle our own country. Don't be sorry for us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Every time Westerner comes, it's about Chinese. What is the problem? Is Namibia everybody knows Chinese? Did you tell Namibians that Chinese have overtaken Namibia? Not on my watch. I told Chinese ambassador, yeah, I'm not your puppet. It was in press everywhere. So please, respect us. That's all I would say. It shows disrespect that we are children who are going to be cajoled by Chinese or so on. No. Chinese are coming in infrastructure all over Africa. And I saw in America, they are there. Who bailed Americans out from the financial crisis? Chinese money is there. So why small Namibia, who fought Germans, even Germans were fighting with you. You are tough people. Now Chinese will come and, after our sovereignty, come and decolonize us? You think so? Germans cannot succeed, even those Germans who are here. So please, at every European coming is about Chinese. And Chinese, we are dealing with them. Then Germany. They come in Germany, then America. France, they bought up France. So Namibia is not bought out yet. So please, as I said, I told Chinese, envy, we're not going to exchange any the old colonial or imperialism with new imperialism. We've got to put it that way.
Well, staying with the matter of how Africans are treated, it's not just Germany that has been treating Africans a certain type of way. I mean, the conversation about how France has been interacting with the locals, their resources, their leaders, is something that we will continue to talk about until something changes. Now, we know that Dr. Arikana Chihombori is one person who's been very vocal and adamant about what France is doing on the continent. And apparently, she's not the only one who's speaking out about it. Congos President Felix Tshisekedi is speaking out against the French and what they believe and how they perceive Africa. Now, news broke that there was somebody in the Macron government that sort of berated the Congolese administration and spoke ill of the government and just did not hold them in high value. And so President Tshisekedi took it upon himself to call that out. And in calling that out, then President Macron was sort of trying to correct him and saying, listen, it was just a journalist who said this. And President Tshisekedi stood up for himself and said, no, it wasn't a journalist. It was somebody in your administration that said something that is borderline racist and disrespectful towards the Congolese government and the Congolese people. Now, before we listen to it, I just want to put something into context. President Macron was defending the comment by saying, it's just a journalist, I'm the president, I'm here, listen to me. But that makes me wonder, what is the French perception? Because you cannot just minimize it and say that it was just a journalist. If it was just a journalist, then that says a lot about how the entire country thinks about Africa and in particular Congo. Because if somebody who's not high up in government has the audacity, the guts and the confidence to speak ill of another country, a country that has history with France, a country that France has been financing, does business with, does trade with, then that says a lot about what government officials say about France. If it was a journalist who actually said this, they had it from somewhere. Most of the time, journalists hear these people from the government briefings that they go to. If it was somebody in government, Mr. Macron can say everything that he wants, but for somebody in his government to have the guts to go ahead and talk ill of a country that has good bilateral and multilateral relationships with France, then it means that they've had the president more than one occasion say something ill. It's just the way Trump, during his time in office, allegedly said Africa is finish for yourself.
Ça aussi, ça doit changer dans la manière de coopérer avec la France et l'Europe. Regardez-nous autrement, en nous respectant, en nous considérant comme de vrais partenaires, et non pas toujours avec un regard paternaliste, avec l'idée de toujours savoir ce qu'il faut pour nous et non pas pour Voilà.
Si le président Tshisekedi m'y autorise, je voudrais apporter un commentaire au commentaire. Je m'explique. Parce que le président a parlé de la France en répondant à la question. Quand un ou une journaliste française pose une question, ça n'est pas le gouvernement de la France. Et c'est bien comme ça. Mais il ne faut pas tout confondre.
Non,
parce que non, mais c'est pas une position de la France.
Je faisais allusion.
Parce qu'il n'y a pas de, il y en a eu.
Je faisais allusion au propos de Le Drian. Lui, il est officiel français.
Oui, mais
le compromis à l'africaine, c'est Le Drian, c'est pas la journaliste.
C'est exact, mais ce compromis. Mais cette formule, président.
The thing is, the West just does not treat Africans poorly. They also want to meddle in the issues of Africans and tell them this is how you do it. I mean, President Kagame on very many occasions has been hard saying, listen, there's no monolithic way of going about life. There's no monolithic way about values. But when it comes to the West, it's either our way, the highway, or no way completely. And Rwanda has had its challenges. President Kagame, we've discussed him on some of our videos before. I think that fair to say that Rwanda, just like any other country, has its challenges. But what I always fail to understand is why is the West so keen to meddle on African affairs and not just meddling in terms of we care about you and we're concerned, meddling in terms of we're superior, this is what we're telling you, do it unless you will face dire consequences. Well, there has been an ongoing case about a Rwandese personality who was accused of being part of the genocide, and the Secretary of State in America came out and was defending the person and said the charges against him are wrong. And President Kagame just came out and said, listen, nobody is going to tell us how we're going to rule ourselves, govern ourselves, and decide our cases. Because now the meddling has gone from, we're going to give you money, this is what you have to do for us, to these are the leaders that you should put in office, this is the way you should live your life, to now, this is the way you should decide your court cases. What is next?
There's a serious case here, but it will be nullified because somebody in the United States is saying so. Well, some people may find that normal. I don't. Rwandans don't. So we might find...
So is Blinken's advocacy and determination of him being wrongly detained helping his case or hurting his case?
I think from what I have said, you can conclude. Yes.
Oh.
Because we've made it clear there isn't anybody going to come from anywhere to bully us into something to do with our lives, and we accept it.
Just finally, is there
And maybe make an invasion and overrun the country, you can do that, but if we are going to be dealing with our problems in this manner, that the one associated with somebody who is powerful will not be held accountable, but the rest will be held accountable. I don't understand it for anything. But let me quickly go to the Congo problem. For Sabajina's case, I think it's clearly where it is. People can keep talking about it. I'm not interested in going into a lot of other details here and there, but those also are happening. But what I wanted to tell you was the general frame of mind around this case and how it operates. It doesn't matter, because we can't just make one person so important that they want to be held accountable. And by the way, this is even when the person we are talking about himself provided evidence against himself by saying what he said, and that is on camera, that can't be disputed. And the responsibility of deaths of people, of Rwandans, if anyone thinks it can just be wished away because of some things, well, we'll see how to deal with that.
And you know, the meddling is very hypocritical, because some of the things that the West is always trying to impose in Africa, they've not fully imposed at home. There are certain cases in America, in Europe, that the public is very divided about. For example, when it comes to sexuality or even abortion rights, America is divided into two, leftists and rightists. So why can't Africa be given the grace to make its mistakes, learn and adapt? And you know, these are the double standards that made the president of Ghana call out the West during an international summit. Because when you look at even things like climate change, the West is very quick to blame Africa and say, oh, look at them, they're always cutting down trees, they're not planting trees, they're not doing enough, they're blah, 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 blah. But they are the heavy emitters. I studied in China, and I will tell you this for free. I had lived in Africa my whole life. There's no place that has air as clean as Africa. The air in that place was far, far, far from clean air. So you have the big emitters, US, Europe, China, trying to sort of twist Africa into playing its part in reducing and mitigating the effects of climate change. Yet the emission that comes from Africa is not even half of the emission that all the big players emit into the environment put together. Africa is still growing, and to tell Africa that they cannot explore their natural resources so that they can depend on themselves, so that you can keep emitting and the environment can continue being at a level ground, because you're curtailing Africa from doing what they need to do to survive, yet you have to do what you don't even need to do, then that is very questionable. And the president of Ghana was like, not today.
The African Development Bank has stated that the continent will need some $3 trillion United States dollars in mitigation and adaptation by 2030 to enable us implement our nationally determined contributions. The obvious question arises is, how do we in Africa finance these commitments, especially as our socio-economic development continues, unfortunately, to be low. The Almighty has blessed our lands with abundant natural resources, and it would be wholly unfair for the world to demand that Africa abandons the exploitation of these same resources needed to finance our development and help us to cope better with the threat of climate change at a time when many countries on the continent have only just discovered them. The development and industrialization of the wealthy nations of today were also hinged on the exploitation of their natural resources. This development came at the expense of pollution and the emission of greenhouse gases. Even today, the Western world is responsible for 76% of carbon emissions. Ghana acknowledges the importance and effects of climate change and the urgent need to combat it. And we acknowledge equally the importance of protecting our development. We believe that a balance must be struck and maintained between our social, economic, and environmental imperatives. We're naturally very disappointed by the failure of the wealthy nations to honor their commitments of making available $100 billion annually to the poorer countries to assist us in the fight against climate change, and by the unavailability of the technology transfer that will help us find sustainable ways of charting a path out of this existential crisis. Those same nations are, however, insisting that we abandon the opportunity for rapid development of our economies. That would be tantamount to enshrining in the global community inequality of the highest order, a totally unacceptable conclusion. We must find a solution that is equitable and fair, a solution that levels the playing field, a solution that recognizes the historical imbalances between the high emitters and low emitters. Ghana therefore supports the call for debt for climate swaps, which will address a multitude of issues in one fell swoop.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I mean, I will always be here when things are not right. I will call out African leaders, and also during times that they rise up to the occasion and they speak for their people, we'll always be here to report it. My name is Andrew Oganga. I hope you liked this the format of this video. If you did, give it a like, give it a thumbs up. Tell me which African leader you like and what they said resonated with you. You can also connect with me on social media at Ondero Oganga, or you can come over to my YouTube channel at Ondero Oganga, where we discuss diaspora stories and relocating back to the continent. I'll see you again next time.